At this time, I'd like to welcome Dr. Melissa Landon. She is an interdisciplinary scientist with a background in molecular biology, protein biochemistry, and computational chemistry. She has spent her career in academia and pharmaceutical settings, working at the intersection of AI and drug discovery and molecular modeling. Melissa, welcome.
Thank you. All right, let's see if we can get this. Is this what I use to work? Okay. Thank you to the organizers for having me. Thank you to the previous speakers for really inspiring and motivating a lot of what I'm going to talk about. And I think what's fascinating me is there is a lot of convergence of philosophy on where we are in this industry. I'm going to talk go a little bit earlier than we've been talking about. We've been talking about patients and healthcare and the healthcare systems. I'm going to take us all the way back to sort of more basic science and R&D and the process of actually bringing new therapeutics to patients. So I work primarily with startups, AI startups, developing technologies specifically aimed at drug discovery or impacting drug discovery. And while I will just preface what I'm saying that I'm one of the biggest, I would say, advocates and enthusiasts of AI, I'm also one of the biggest skeptics. Okay, so I'm going to keep it real. I was going to name my talk A Biased Perspective, but I feel like that's implicit in the title. So to this point, starting with the why, how many people here work in the pharmaceutical industry or in drug discovery? Okay, a few, right, great. So, and you don't need to pay attention to what everything that's up here, but suffice to say that drug discovery is a very long, and by discovery what I mean, the process of going from basic science into clinic, into testing compounds in patients. That whole process is extremely long. It's often done very sequentially, very siloed, and we'll talk more about that. And I think most startlingly, sorry, the little error down there, it's very, very prone to failure. So if you look at the bottom, this is the probability of transitioning from one stage to the next of the process. So by the time you go from early target discovery, where you've discovered some interesting biology, and you think, hey, we want to drug this, we think this will impact patients, to actually having a drug go to market, you have about a 2% probability of success of that actually working out. That's pretty bad. I mean, I don't know any other industry that accepts that level of failure, do you? I mean, and, also, it costs a lot of money. So the cost now of bringing a new drug to market, when you capitalize for all the failure, is over $2 billion. So if we think about drug pricing, why things are so expensive, and we look at the time, it takes 10 to 15 years. Most drugs have a patent life of about 20, 25 years. That doesn't leave companies much time to recoup the money that they've invested and spent. This has not just an impact on patients, but it has a significant economic impact, right? So the question is, and really I think, one of the other things to note is these numbers and this time keeps going up. So as we've brought technology to bear, and I'm not just talking about AI technology, but all kinds of, laboratory technology, knowledge, we are still not doing better. And in fact, we're kind of doing worse. And we can talk at length after this for why that is, but just say that. Now, one thing I just want to say is the idea of using machines, computers to design drugs is not new. This was the cover of Fortune magazine on October 5th, 1981 on the left, right? And on the right is a cover of Nature Methods, January of 2022, right? Where we talk about protein structure prediction. I started my career, actually sort of similar to Aaron, I was pre-med, then decided to bag that and go into computational science. I started my graduate work in 2002, and that was really, when the Human Genome Project had just finished. There was a lot of high-volume data being generated, advances in computer vision and so forth. And it was a really exciting time to think about how we might use computers, machine learning to do things better. So what we call AI today, and all people in this industry just kind of laugh. It's like, yeah, we've been doing this for some time. I think the algorithms have gotten more sophisticated. Certainly the data has gotten more scalable. But we've been thinking about this for a long time, and so Roz and I share the same hype cycle. So I think right now, for AI and drug discovery, we're somewhere in here. Okay, there was huge enthusiasm for technologies impacting drug discovery, for AI technologies. There was a lot of venture money being poured in, a lot of partnerships being formed, and then we're actually right now, frankly, not seeing the delivery. We're not seeing, and as the market has sort of gone through an adjustment, the burden of proof is high right now, right? We actually need to see impact. We are starting to, I would say, but we're not totally there yet. And just another way of showing this is if you look at the amount of funding that the investment community is putting into these types of technologies. 2021, you could go to an investor, say, hey, I got this, I'm a smart computer scientist, I got a cool AI algorithm, I want to design drugs. They're like, great, here's $10 million, go. Today, that's a little more challenging, and I see that with the companies that I advise. So, but that's not to say that, progress hasn't been made, and it's funny that, the talk I was going to give, which was much more, I would say, doom and gloom about a week ago, now seeing, the news this week with the Nobel Prize, I was like, okay, I need to be a little more optimistic and happy. But, really, David Baker, others, the work is starting to have impact. We're seeing the legitimization of this field, right? I thought it was interesting that both basically Facebook and Google won Nobel Prizes this week. But we are really, this is becoming mainstream, and this is really exciting for us, right, in what we do. But, and so let's think about how do we actually use these technologies, right? And I'm talking about in an early discovery perspective. So, there's a lot of work being done in target identification. I'm sure maybe, Jean will probably talk about this later, and with the virtual twin work and so forth. Biomarker ID, clinical trial design. There's a lot of, I think, real impact that AI that we're seeing it have there. I mean, we're seeing fully synthetic control arms in clinical trials and so forth. Earlier stage and kind of the area where I work and the companies I work with, thinking about more generative approaches to chemistry, to actually designing molecules at the, at the first place. And thinking about then how do we also, drug discovery essentially is a ginormous multi-parameter optimization problem, because not only are you designing molecules that have an impact, on the target, the disease, but you also have to put it in a person, and it has to work in a person. It has to not be toxic, it has to be absorbed, it has to be metabolized, so forth. So this is the reason why it's often very challenging. So we're starting to think about how AI can be used there as well. And I think one of the big challenges is all of these things, all these require data, and a lot of data. And generally speaking, the further you go through the process, the less scalable and the more expensive that data generation becomes. And also, and I think John alluded to this, the data access becomes a huge issue, right? So a lot of the data is held in big pharma, and it never sees the light of day, right? So this is a big challenge, I think, from a model building AI perspective. However, I think this was really interesting. This was a study that was just published by Boston Consulting Group this summer about, okay, what is the impact that AI is actually having in drug discovery? And what I thought was kind of interesting, and again, these are early signals. There is no drug on the market that has been designed by AI yet today. But what they're seeing is that the probability of success of phase 1 clinical trials, which is where you're assessing safety and maybe early efficacy, is significantly improved. Again, small n. However, when we get to phase 2, which is where most things fail in the clinic, which is where we're actually looking at, does this drug actually work and do what it's supposed to do, we're seeing about a similar attrition rate as we were pre-AI. So what that means is, we still have work to do. And we need to think about, how do we, again, I think a lot of this comes back to data, for all the things that previous speakers have spoken about, access. I would argue that drug discovery is not a big data industry. we don't have nearly the data that large companies have, so building models becomes more challenging. And how do we actually validate? So when I talk to friends in pharma who have all these cool generative chemistry technologies at their fingertips, I'm like, do you guys actually use this? And they're like, well, no, we don't. And I say, well, why don't you? They're like, well, the AI spits out these crazy, these crazy compounds that look cool, but there's no way a chemist can actually make them. So, we waste a lot of time. So we're just going to go back to, the tried and true of what we do before. I'm like, okay, well, that's, fair but disappointing. So we need to think about, again, keeping the human, going back to the human in the loop. How do we, make these tools practically applicable, right? At the end of the day, we still have to be able to make things, to synthesize things, to test things. And so we need, a better way of sort of filtering out what is unlikely to be able to be done. And thinking about, again, going back to, the question of sort of domain-specific, the challenges of ChatGPT and LLMs, I think a one-size-fits-all is probably not going to work in this industry. Thinking about creating more bespoke, custom LLMs where you have, some way of assessing credibility, which is huge in this industry, where you can have them, continuously learn and update is going to be crucial to success. And again, going back to how do we reduce that cycle time going from, idea to testing to learning. So I think there's a lot that still needs to be done with respect to how do we build the experimental, the infrastructure to support the application, scalable application of AI in this industry. And of course, I also think, I think from when this paper was published where they talk about, a lot about how we need to change mindset, I do think mindset has changed significantly over the last few years. I think that, most scientists I talk to are very happy to adopt and embrace AI and computational technologies if they're going to be impactful, but they need to be impactful. So with that, thank you. I look forward to answering questions and happy to share these slides with anybody. So thanks.